Don't be afraid to step into your full potential. It's great for us when we can do that as individual coaches, and it's even more powerful for our clients.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets podcast. I'm your host, Regin, and today's guest is Richard Hinwood, a seasoned executive coach, leadership expert, and founder of Enriched Leadership, where he helps leaders and leadership teams elevate their effectiveness, achieve exceptional results, and build high-performing, resilient organizations. With the experience leading strategy for a £200 million international business and servicing as chief of staff to one of the world's most successful leaders, Richard brings a rare combination of boardroom expertise and deep coaching insight. He's worked with over 300 individual leaders and 100 plus boards and executive teams, guiding them through transformative leadership journeys using globally recognized tools like Leadership Circle Profile, Collective Leadership Assessment, and Leadership System. And it's a pleasure for me to have him on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Thanks so much, Regin. Great to speak with you today.
Thank you for coming, Richard. It's a pleasure for us to have you on, and wanted to learn more about your beginnings. And first of all, what inspired you to become a coach and then start your own coaching business?
Sure. So I think that really comes from a love of helping others to grow, to develop and thrive. Perhaps comes from the fact both of my parents were teachers. So there's something about that focus on growth and fulfilling your potential that's probably been with me for a long time. Early in my career, that showed itself more as a desire for myself to learn and grow as a person. But I was fortunate in my corporate career that the longer I was doing that work, I was able to help others more. And that's where the passion for wanting to become a coach really came from. And then combined with the fact that I have a love of leadership and what's possible through helping others to improve their leadership effectiveness. And I now love the fact that I get such a variety through leadership coaching and leadership consultancy. I'm working with individuals, teams, firms, and everyone from emerging talent through to C-suite. And I still get to be a lifelong learner as a result, because I always get to learn something from the people I work with as well.
When I think about the clients that you're working with right now, how would you we know we're talking about leaders, we're talking about either executives. How would you describe the ideal client profile if you were to break it down? Is there a certain demographic, certain industry, certain common goals, commonalities that they have?
I think there's one commonality that all our clients have had, and that's very much that they have a desire and a passion to improve their own leadership. Invariably, they all share a level of openness and curiosity about themselves, about the people they work with, about the people their businesses help. They're naturally open to feedback, learning what others see and experience when they work with them. And what's great with that is we're then working with people who aren't just seeking to learn what's possible, but they're automatically engaged with what it takes to improve their own leadership, receiving feedback from others on what they like about what you're doing, what they don't like so much about what they're doing, what they'd like to see you do that you're not yet doing. That can leave people in quite a vulnerable position, and not everyone in a leadership role is happy to open themselves up to that level of vulnerability. But pretty much everyone we've worked with, whether it's an individual leader or a team or a board, or whether we're talking about an emerging leader or someone in the C-suite, they're all coming with that curiosity and openness and willingness to learn and become better and best version of themselves as a leader.
And how is it like to work with you for the leaders that are listening? How is it like to work with you? Is there a certain program that they go through How would you describe the engagement with you? Is it one-on-one coaching, group coaching?
It depends. It's very much everything we do is bespoke. So we're a boutique leadership consultancy, which is great because it means we can structure what we're doing to suit each individual client. To put it into a few sort of simple boxes for ease of understanding, we do a mix of work, some with individual leaders where we're working one-on-one, so more a coaching capacity, and we do some work with groups, teams, and boards. So that's more in a collective capacity. I think the most effective work that we do with leaders, whether individually or collectively, is when we start with a 360 assessment and we're really gaining that data into what's working well, what's not working so well, where the growth opportunities are. And when we've got that 360, again, whether it's for the individual or for the team, from there we can then look at actually what's the most effective step or set of steps for that individual or team to take. So 360 is not always necessarily that popular. Again, it leads people into a state of vulnerability because they don't know what others are going to say about them. But from that vulnerability comes the potential to really excel in one's own growth. So 360 are a key part of our practice, both for individuals and teams.
And when you get a new client, and this is a question mostly that other coaches would be interested in, what marketing channels are you seeing working very well for you right now? Is there a certain channel that works better than the others?
I'm not sure if it's necessarily channels as such, but we've done a lot of work in the last year or so on building some partnerships with others working in associated sectors, if that's the right description. So health and well-being, for instance, is one that we work closely alongside. So we've got partnerships with a number of businesses who specialize in helping workplaces to be as healthy and promote well-being as much as possible. And we have a great relationship and partnership with those firms because there's a huge amount we can do on the leadership side that not only elevates the leadership effectiveness, but also does so in a way that helps their businesses to promote sustainable productivity, which in turn helps the business's long-term financial success, but also the long-term sustainable success of their individuals so they can keep performing at the highest level without suffering or risking suffering from burnout. So that's been a particularly useful source this year. Also some partnerships with those who advise family-owned businesses, because as you mentioned at the start, part of my background is from working with the founders and leaders of family-owned businesses. And that's a fantastic and fascinating set of businesses to work in, because the nature of a family-owned business is the dining table is also the same table as the boardroom table. And there are a whole set of family relationships that impact leadership dynamics. So it's a fascinating area to get to help leaders to develop in. Referrals is always a great source of work, and I think that's probably true for anyone and everyone in coaching. And we're seeing a little bit more from LinkedIn and direct approaches that are coming from LinkedIn. So that's still an area of growth for us at the minute. And the aim at the moment is to do a bit more on the conference scene, some public speaking and keynotes on leadership. So we've got some more of that in the pipeline and excited to see what comes from that.
Because I actually just wanted to ask you, and look into the future for like the next 1 to 3 years, what are some specific goals you're working towards? So here we also include like more speaking events. What else are you thinking of like developing in the future?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I don't necessarily think in terms of goals in that sort of time frame. And 1 to 3 years is certainly not a short time frame. But I guess this comes from our leadership focus, where vision and purpose is one of the key drivers of leadership effectiveness. So much of what we're doing at Enrich Leadership is maintaining our focus on our vision and purpose, which is very simply to elevate the practice of leadership. So everything we're doing is around that basis without necessarily thinking about the goals. But as you rightly say, greater attendance at conferences and more keynote speeches, that's definitely something we're working towards. We're probably midway through developing our first open program, which is going to be focused on emerging leaders and the skills and knowledge they need to build to thrive in what's certainly now an increasingly uncertain workplace. So that's something that's already in the pipeline. potentially next summer looking to partner with a health and wellbeing business to launch an in-person retreat. So that's something that we've done before, so it's a little bit different. And we're at the early stages of exploring a new piece of work around leadership culture, which I can't say too much more about at the minute, but that's something that's certainly sparking our interest and curiosity. And that alone makes it a worthwhile piece of work to get involved with.
So I wanted to dig a little bit deeper when you say having like an open program for leaders. How is that different from what you are doing right now? Is there a difference from what you're offering right now?
Yeah, definitely. So at the minute, everything we offer at the moment is whoever would contact us looking for our coaching or consulting business, we tailor everything we're doing to specifically their current environment. It may be their firm if it's their business that's bringing us on board rather than them individually. So we're bespoking what we do specifically to them. The open program itself is going to be more in terms of generic content, although I can't say I love that phrase, but we are specifically handpicking the most valuable pieces of advice that we could give to emerging leaders, regardless of their sector, so completely sector agnostic. So either if they're in organizations that haven't focused on leadership development for people at their level yet, or they've already had some in-house training, but they're thinking, what's the best thing I can know and what's the best thing I can do right now to grow as a leader? That's very much what the open program will be about. And they'll be able to sign up directly themselves without having to go through their firm if they didn't want to do that.
So right now they go through the firm. So when we think about the open program, is also like something kind of like packaged in a way that would apply to most leaders, but is not, let's say, as bespoke as what you have right now is, right?
Yeah, definitely not as bespoke, but as I say, we're handpicking the things that
most commonly show up, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've decided to focus very much on emerging leaders for that open program for two reasons. I think firstly, it's an area that's currently underserved in terms of giving great advice in terms of what to do from a leadership perspective. I feel there's a little bit too much of let's focus on CEOs and look backwards to what they did and then encourage emerging leaders to do that. I just don't think that's going to work in the future that we are entering now, given the speed of technical innovation, the interconnectedness of everything in the world. I think there's a different set of skills that emerging leaders need to develop now to be the most effective leaders in the future. So we're designing the program for that to be really ready to help them for their long-term growth.
And it should in theory also be more scalable, right? Packaged and more scalable, right?
Yeah, that's definitely part of the hope with it, that it makes it easier for people just to become part of a community as well, potentially. We can easily have, I'll pick a number out of the air, let's just say 30 for want of argument's sake, passionate and engaged emerging leaders who would never otherwise have connected with each other, apart from they really want to elevate their leadership and make sure that what they're doing now early in their careers is the most beneficial for them. We have the chance through this open program to help bring them together, whereas everything we've done to date, otherwise they would just be working in isolation with us or potentially with others in their own firm without actually getting that cross-sector experience and everything else that can come, potentially even cross-international experience. All of that becomes possible through the open program.
Interesting. So it's a very powerful idea when you think about it. And what about the retreats? So currently, you mentioned that you want to have that partnership with a wellness center so you can do more retreats. You mentioned that you are doing them already, but what is changing, kind of?
Yeah, so it's not something we've done yet. Not actually looked at, or not actually taken the step into hosting retreats. It's just something that's come from our work with health and well-being focused businesses already. It tends to be that health and well-being is discussed, if it's discussed at all in organizations, but when it is discussed, it tends to be discussed more in isolation, as does leadership. Whenever there's some leadership work, that's discussed in isolation as well. And I don't think these topics, and there are other topics that could be brought into it or brought together as well in the same way, but they don't always need to be in isolation. And there's definitely some power in looking at topics like leadership and health and well-being together in a joint package, if package is the right word. And we're thinking that a retreat format may be a good way, probably in this case focused on more senior leaders around the C-suite and heads of departments is probably the sector or the level of seniority we're looking at for that. We're still in the exploratory stage of thinking about that one.
Mm-hmm. I really like retreats actually because we've done a couple ourselves as well. We did one in Mexico, in Tulum, in this May. And we found them to be very, very powerful, just like a group of people with the same goals, getting together, being able to be kind of like in paradise, but also be able to make some progress on their goals as well at the same time. It was perfect. And I really like it. And more coaches that I've spoken to on the podcast are exploring these retreat options for their clients. So it's a great idea.
I think they're really interesting and can be powerful, incredibly powerful. The brilliant thing is, it's, I guess, a double-edged sword. The brilliant thing is you get to step away from life as it currently is and therefore really focus on what it is you'd like to focus on without the distractions. But the flip side, and it's the problem is the same as the great thing, is that you're stepping away from the real world. Therefore, what you work on at the retreat, you still have that challenge of how to incorporate it back into the day-to-day life afterwards. So I think it's that second part of it that we're wanting to work on in the design up front, and that very much comes from my strategy background before, of looking to what it is you really want to create in terms of the value, as opposed to just what it is you're actually creating, and almost doing that pre-mortem of saying, well, this is what we'd like to do, this is our plan. Let's time travel forward and imagine it hasn't worked. Why hasn't it worked? And then knowing what we know now, we time travel back to the present again and say, great, now what can we actually do to refine our design so that when we put it into practice, we're not falling into the trap that I think some retreats or away days can fall into, where they feel a little bit too distant and distinct from what people do next. So the more actionable the value that's generated in the retreat can be, absolutely. I think they're superb ways for individual leaders and leadership teams to commit their time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so wanted to also ask you and touch a little bit more on investments. And this is something that we will also put in our research, just like I mentioned earlier. What have been some investments you've made over time that you feel very good about? Either they had a good return or you got to learn a lot from that investment. And what have been some investments that you don't feel so good about, or investments that you could have potentially have avoided?
So I'm going to take the word investments, both in terms financial, but also time and energy, because I think they're all important investments that we choose to make as individuals. There's a few that jump to mind that were fantastic. Being part of the leadership circle community, 100% is the most valuable community I've been part of throughout my whole career. We all share a collective goal in wanting to elevate leadership to not just be effective, but to have a larger and richer positive difference on the world. We all go about using what we've learned through that community in slightly different ways, but having a community that shares that same underlying reason for being, that's incredibly rewarding. I also think at the end of my corporate career, I took a good 6 months out, full on career break, to refresh, rejuvenate. I took my first holiday for about 2 years in that time. I had a chance to have no distractions with work or anything else when I got married. And that meant I could enjoy so much more of the build up to that day, the day itself. My wife and I have got so many memories from that day. We hear so many people say they felt their wedding day went by in a blur. And we feel we have got so many snapshots of memories from that day, which just wouldn't have happened for me if I'd not been able to take that time away from working life. So I think that investment of free time and energy in myself was definitely completely worth the time I put into doing that. I guess it's interesting in terms of ones that haven't worked, because there's nothing that jumps to mind, and that's not because there won't be things that haven't worked. I'm just very much in a stage of always looking for what is working and doubling down on it, and then a mixture of exploration and creativity, trial and innovation. And I guess I don't think too much about those things that haven't necessarily worked, which is a big change for me as an individual. I would have early in my career been very hung up on starting something and not finishing it. Whereas I think through being exposed to these myself and feedback from other people, I've learned about my perfectionist tendency and the way that can hold me back if I hold on too tightly to it. So in one way, I almost embrace those things that don't work, but I embrace them in the sense of being content with them and just letting them go. And then just continually looking for what the next thing to try and learn from is. So I guess the thing, it's not an investment, not an intentional investment, but it's the unintentional investment of having held on to things that previously in my life that I thought should have worked and didn't, and not moving past them quickly enough. There's power in letting go and being open to what comes next.
Yeah, absolutely. Because just like you said, it gives you the opportunity to be open for the next ones. And not all investments typically work very well. Some of them you get to learn, some of them you actually get good return on. Yeah, having an open mind on that is key for like looking forward. I wanted to ask you, when thinking about the goals that you mentioned initially, so think about like doing more speaking, more conferences, having that open program that is more scalable, doing these retreats. Where do you see the challenges in either doing that or like looking at actually short term? Don't have to look at like 1 to 3 years for challenges, like challenge that you're trying to solve for next, let's say even this quarter.
Yeah, it's a really good question. We could spend a whole podcast probably just on challenges, but it's nice to not have to focus on those all the time. There's one around the leadership space in particular where I think there are lots of leadership models out there, but I don't think there's a perfect leadership model. It almost goes without saying that they're all context specific, and all leaders can benefit from a sense of agility in how they're doing things. But there are certainly some prevalent models out there. Authentic leadership is spoken about a lot. Servant leadership is another. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with either of those models. They are powerful models of leadership that leaders can choose to follow and embrace. But I often hear those models held up as the sort of panacea, the ideal. And straight away, we know that there's integral leadership, which we don't hear people talk about so much. That's even more powerful model, but there are layers beyond that as well. So I think on the leadership side, it's one of the challenges, just there's no perfect model to keep talking about. And that makes it interesting because there's so much we can talk about. But as you mentioned with scalability earlier, without a really powerful model behind it, that makes the scalability element slightly more challenging. I think if we look at coaching more generally, I think the rise and evolution of technology, the speed of change with tech, creates both opportunities and challenges for anyone in the coaching sector. And I wouldn't say it's an easy market to be in at all in the minute, certainly not in the UK, but that also makes it a rewarding market to be in. So we're looking at an uncertain future. It's fast moving, interconnected. There's a huge amount of value that we can add in the coaching and consulting space, but we have to be there and keep showing up and adding the value that we can to make that work on a daily and yearly basis. And I guess the big question for myself is always, what can I keep taking away and doing to help me with my own leadership journey? Because my day-to-day is very much focused on how I'm helping others and improving their leadership, but I also have my own leadership style, my leadership competencies, things I don't know about myself, things others might see about me that I don't see. So I'm always looking to how can I best keep growing through the work that I'm doing too. And there's no perfect answer to that, but it's certainly something that's there for me to keep working on at the same time as everything else.
Cool. And when thinking about scalability, since we were on the topic, and this is the final question, what advice would you give to other coaches who are thinking of scaling their impact?
I'm a big lover of sort of rules of three. So let's try and go for three things. So number one, I'd probably say keep focusing on creating the greatest value that you can. When we're doing that as coaches, we're helping our clients and everyone that they come into contact with to succeed and have richer lives. So that's definitely got to be the number one thing we should all focus on. I mentioned earlier about partnerships. I've loved having partnerships with firms who provide a different service but for the same clients. And that goes beyond just simple referral between us. We also try and learn a bit more about what each other brings, which means when we provide leadership advice, we're making sure that we're aligning with what our health and well-being partners are doing, and vice versa when they're ensuring that firms that they work with are creating the healthiest and most supportive cultures they can. They're automatically now looking for what is it that we can help them do on the leadership side to reinforce. So it's that people talk about win-win. I think effective partnerships are triple win because it works for both coaches or consulting firms and the client at the same time. And the third one is just that don't be afraid as a coach to step into your full potential. One of the things we've learned working with, particularly with the most senior leaders, is there's often that sense of imposter syndrome that comes in, and they won't say it in their day-to-day life to anyone else, but it does come up in coaching, especially if there's a 360 behind it, because it's, senior leaders, and this can be true for coaches as well, who are often experts in their area. There's loads on the strength side that they've got. They can tick all the strengths off, but there will almost invariably some sort of internal saboteur that can be holding them back. For me, it's often that perfectionist piece. For others, it's sometimes wanting to control things that are uncertain, and that takes a lot of their effort. For others, it can be that they tend to take a step back when they're not so sure about things and they distance themselves. And therefore, for those individuals, as I say, this can often be coaches, it's not about learning something new. It's about, sound a bit odd perhaps, but learning and being open to oneself and what's within themselves that can be holding them back. I don't have that many coaches as clients. It was never a target group for us. But one coach came to me at the start of this year wanting a 360, and we got feedback from a number of different clients they'd worked with. And as I say, in terms of their strengths, everything was coming back pretty much as the coach knew and was hoping it would. But there was one particular area of saboteurism they had within themselves that they just hadn't looked at, and they knew about it ultimately, but hadn't really focused on how that was holding them back. And so we did a fairly short piece of work with them, only a matter of 2 or 3 months, and straight away they were feeling that much more fulfilled in what they were doing. So don't be afraid to step into your full potential. It's great for us when we can do that as individual coaches, and it's even more powerful for our clients.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much for that great advice. And thank you for coming to our podcast today. For anyone who wants to connect with you or reach out to you, they can go into LinkedIn, look up Richard Hinwood. They'll be able to find your profile. I believe they can also go into the website, enrich-leadership.co.uk, right?
Absolutely.
Is there any other way that people can connect?
There aren't too many Richard Hinwoods in the world, so the old Google search is quite powerful. There's more than one of us, but any search on Richard Hinwood and leadership, but particularly with Enrich Leadership, those are the two best ways to get in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thanks, Regin. Been a pleasure to talk to you.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.